this is a response video to the response video that the good student made regarding my video about why I can't understand fandoms. And he and his guest made an interesting point that I kind of wanted to elaborate a bit on when they were talking about hobbies in particular. And I guess this will kind of get into why I am so autistically drawn to anime in particular compared to a lot of other mediums. So they were mentioning like hobbies, and I was thinking that perhaps the people within these fandoms and within these hobbies are perhaps the real casuals, because a lot of times I think the more traditional lifestyle is for someone to work a 9 to 5 job, have a family, and then to have a hobby on the side. The hobby is not something that they're uh, paying a considerable amount of attention to on a daily basis, but it's mostly something to keep in the back of their mind, and it's something to take their mind off everything else they're doing. So that's why you see a lot of like Ryaju with more technical hobbies, stuff like hunting or fishing and stuff like that. Maybe they're even into like programming or whatever. It just seems like something that is able to take their mind off a lot of things. And the difference between them and people like us otaku, and me in particular, um, us new types, if you will, is that um, we basically the hobbies that we have are an extension of ourselves, and they're what we obsess about because that's really all that we have going for us. Because there's a lot of other things that Ryaju have that we don't, and we end up having to give more and more attention to the hobbies that we have, for better or for worse. It might be framed as something negative, like I'm saying that these hobbies are escapism, but they might not necessarily be the case because you can be like an otaku within something else, or you can be like these Ryaju type people, but you get really, really into the hobby that you have. So there's a distinction to be made between someone casually into it and someone who isn't casually into it. I kind of touched on this point a little bit within my fandom video where I was talking about um, when I was obsessed with Kingdom Hearts for a stretch of time, and that was because that was when I was going through my Pars on Suicide Watch arc, where I was really depressed, and I found myself drawn to this thing because it was the only thing that was. It's something about the series resonated a lot with me, and I found myself thinking about it out of necessity. And I think a lot of people within fandoms do the same as well. Perhaps their necessity is a little bit different because it might be the only thing they have, or oftentimes it's the only thing that they are into. Like if you're into a specific fandom, for example, like the guest was talking about, like Sonic games. I think I mentioned that in my video too. A lot of these people haven't played any other games. They've only played Sonic games, but they know everything about Sonic games. Um, I find this fascinating, and when I say I can't understand fandoms, it's more talking about how I kind of wish I was within a fandom, but instead I am, I find myself at odds with all the choices that I'm faced with, so I end up becoming just a general media consumer of anime in general. So it ends up being, like, I mean, I wouldn't call being an otaku being part of a fandom because it's a bit too general. It's way more of an umbrella term than something else, but it's more specific than saying, "Oh, I'm into video games" or something like that. Because video games is a much broader um, medium, I think. But like, they're both pretty similar, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with that point, but bringing this all back to hobbies and talking about origami, I think one of the reasons why, especially throughout my entire life, why a lot of these hobbies that I will pick up for a short period of time and end up leaving them behind is because a lot of these hobbies have a skill ceiling, and I never really break through that skill ceiling, or a lot of times I don't see a reason to do so. During 2017, during the summer, I was watching a lot of, or rather listening to a lot of the Procrastinators podcasts, and that was during a time when I wanted to be an art boy, um, and I picked up drawing, and I was drawing really bad anime fan art, but I was drawing nevertheless, and I was like watching YouTube videos on how to get better at drawing and whatever. Like as a kid, I obviously like most kids was into drawing and stuff. I think I was a bit more into drawing than most other kids. Uh, like when I was in elementary school and whatnot, I think like my art teacher and stuff would praise me because I was good at art or something like that. If you can be good at art, but I think the reason why I was praised a lot back then is because I probably just had more attention than most people for these things, like as in an attention span. And for a lot of things, this was the case because like I'm into reading, but I'm only into reading because I have the attention span to do that. A lot of people don't. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like super into reading or whatever, but I digress. But anyways, I was getting into drawing during this time, but I eventually reached a point where, like, I didn't really see myself improving, and I didn't really I didn't really have an end game for it. Besides, just the idea of being good at drawing, and that wasn't really setting myself up for success or whatever. So I ended up drawing just a little bit for a couple months, and then ended up putting down my pen, and really haven't picked it up since. I know people who go in with the same ambitions and end up like finding more to enjoy within it, but I didn't really have the attention to do so because I know there's other things that could draw my attention more. But it's similar to origami as well that I mentioned that I was doing origami, and I reached a point where I had exhausted a lot of the collections of stuff I wanted to make. Like I used to go to the library a lot, and I rented every single origami book there. A lot of them were just beginner books, which were bullshit. Like how to fold the paper crane. Everybody knows how to fold the paper crane, so it's not really teaching you anything interesting. And a lot of them were like party trick ones, where it teaches you how to blow that like what is it, like the samurai hat? It's not the samurai hat. But it's like the hat you make out of the newspaper or whatever, and then like the blow up bomb and whatnot. And those were fun to make once, but I wanted to make the more technical models. I wanted to make like the animals and like the really weird shit. I remember there was one where you could make nail clippers, and there was another one where you could make a Swiss Army knife out of a single sheet of paper, no cuts. And I thought these were way more fascinating than folding up like a blow up bomb or whatever, because these more technical ones were what drew my attention. That the idea that you could fold this out of a single piece of paper was what drew me in initially. But then, like, after doing these and then, like, folding a bunch of animals and stuff and printing out PDFs of ones I found online, I eventually realized that, like, my initial motivation for getting into origami, which was to fold cool things out of paper, was already satisfied because I didn't really go into this with a goal. I think, like, most people who go into a hobby, they don't have a goal. But a lot of times, when I approach something, I have this idea of what mastery is. And once I reach some form of mastery or at least some form of competence, I'm able to, I guess, confidently mentally check out of that hobby for a bit, because I think I've generally exhausted my interest within it. But the difference here is that with anime, there is no skill ceiling for anime. If anime was an RPG, it is entirely comprised of side quests, in that you can do whatever you want, and there's no way about going through the game because anime doesn't have an ending. It doesn't have a main quest. It doesn't have a final boss. It's just all side quests, and you don't have to like level up or anything. You can just go through it at your own pace. It's it's what every game developer should aspire to do. Not really though. I don't know anything about game development, but with anime, when I first started to get into anime, and much like reading, reading is another hobby that I've had for a long time, and for me, reading is probably going to be something until the day I die, because there is no skill ceiling with it, just like with anime. That with reading, obviously, you could pick up more difficult books, which is something I wanted to do when I was younger. I remember what is it called? It's like the Lexile reading score or something like that when you're in elementary or middle school that you're assigned, and I wanted to have the highest Lexile reading score of anyone around so I could read the hard books. So I would read a lot of the more classic books, like what was it, War of the Worlds, like a lot of the H.G. Wells stuff, which I mean isn't significantly more complicated, but for a lot of like compared to a lot of the other things kids were reading, it wasn't. It was a step above, but like I wanted to read the adult books kind of thing. I want that was my goal. But like eventually, I stopped caring about that, and the reason I did that is because it didn't really matter, because there is no skill ceiling for reading, because eventually you will reach a point when with your reading level as a kid that you would just be able to read everything, and by the time most people are like in middle school or high school, they can just read anything that's ever existed. I mean, some more technical writing and research papers and stuff are going to be difficult to parse, but it's not like you can't read through it, especially now with Google that you can just look up any word. So, like with reading, there is no end to the amount of books that exist, and I guess it's similar to music as well. Music is a little bit different because it's more of a passive thing. Um, but with reading, you could, like I said, you could just read whatever the heck you want. You could read fiction, you could read nonfiction, whatever. Go wild with that. So with reading is something I think I could totally see myself doing until the day I die, because it's just it's a very general hobby to have, and I don't think I would even call it a hobby. Though these days that most people don't read, like your average Riaju or whatever, they don't read outside of like maybe like a how-to book or whatever. Uh, I guess it kind of is a hobby, which is unfortunate, but whatever. So bringing this all back to anime, anime is similar to reading, like I said, because there is no skill ceiling for it. Like what the that white hand mentioned in his gatekeeping video, I left a comment on there. I've always been an advocate of people gatekeeping, especially within anime, and I like to hold people to a certain regard with that. Maybe that's why I don't get along with a lot of people, because I feel that when I first got into anime, I saw like this entire medium and it was kind of overwhelming. But I wanted to get to the classics. I wanted to watch the required reading, so to speak, which are shows like Neon Genesis Evangelion, 0079 Gundam. You got to watch some Ghibli movies, and like there's like a lot of shows within these like Haruhi and stuff. Like one of each like genre. Like one show from each, like the best show from each genre, and it will be representative of the genre. So I've never been obsessed with a single thing because I wanted to know everything about anime, or at least have as broad of a perspective as I can. And because anime has no end game, like I probably will, well, I most definitely will die before I finish every single anime, unless we reach a technological singularity and I upload my brain to a computer. In which case, I will make it my mission to watch every anime that ever existed. But, anyways, so with anime, when I got into anime, I wanted to see a lot of these things, and this was back in the day when, like, I was watching like YouTube review shows like Glass Reflections, and like browsing our anime. I was a total casual, but I refrained from commenting on our anime for the longest time because I felt that my knowledge of anime was not adequate enough to be part of a conversation. I wanted to have these required reading things under my belt before I made a fool of myself. I mean, you can have all these things under your belt and still make a fool of yourself, but I didn't want to go into a conversation and not be able to draw like all these cards from within my deck if the conversation required it. So I think like my younger brother has recently been getting into anime, so I've been recommending him a lot of these. Like I made him watch Ava. He enjoyed it, but I think that when you're getting into a hobby like this, there should be some sort of barrier for entry that you should see these things and like, hey, you should watch these things. You don't have to watch them now, but if you're going to consider yourself a fan of these of this medium or whatever, you should listen or you should watch these. I did the same with music. Like I would go on Mew on 4chan, the music board, and like I would just listen to whatever MewCore said to listen to. So obviously listening to a lot of those classics like In an Aeroplane Over the Sea and whatever. Everybody who's browsed that board has listened to that fucking album. It's a pretty good album. Not sure if it's as good as Mew says it is, but I enjoy it. But there's like these required reading things that this hobby has, and I think that's what allowed me to it made it more of a thing that I became invested into because I was able to, or it was a necessity to um, consume these things. And by the time I finished consuming all these required reading texts, in this case shows, I was already obsessed with the fandom itself, or within the anime medium itself, that I realized that, hey, this is something I'm into. And then I saw, by the time I was invested into it, I saw that there is an endless sea of possibility within the fandom. I keep saying fandom. I don't think anime is a fandom, right? With my definition, anime isn't a fandom because it's a very, like, it's just an umbrella term. It's a Japanese colloquialism, if you will. Uh, but I guess, like, to an outsider, it would appear that you are part of the anime fandom in general. But I digress. So yeah, that's the analogy that anime is an RPG, and it's entirely comprised of side quests is kind of how I think about this. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy anime a lot, and why I've persistently returned to it. And because, like, there is so much variety within it, that one week I could be watching a 1970s mecha show, and the next week I could be watching like a late 2010s cute girls doing cute things show, and I enjoy both of them equally. I think a lot of other people who get into anime and get into fandoms are people who are uh, obsessed with a specific show. They really like Gundam or something, and their interest begins and ends with Gundam, and that's why they're a part of that fandom. But people who don't feel that a strong attachment to fandoms are the people who are possibly the real otaku, the ones who aren't able to get within these fandoms because they're able to appreciate the medium from a more broad perspective. And I think that was a good point the guest made up, that if you continue to stay within this specific fandom, or like with Sonic games, like I mentioned before, you probably have never played any other games. So even if you have a very uh, deep understanding of Sonic games, but your entire understanding of video games as a whole is really weak. So when you might talk about Sonic, or might talk about, like, whatever, insert fandom here, uh, like, you might be able to see a lot of interesting things within it, but your perspective is extremely limited, so your analysis is almost worthless because you're both clouded by the eyes of someone who is obsessed with these things, while also being someone who doesn't have a broad perspective of what game design is in general. So um, it's kind of a double-edged sword, maybe. I don't know if that's the correct way to say that. But my last point, to further address and exacerbate the point a bit, the good student left a comment on my videos wondering if I will ever get tired of watching anime. And hopefully, like a lot of the points I made here will kind of explain that as well, that I think, similar to reading, I think since there is no skill ceiling for anime, my personality will find it something that I could continuously return to, because, like I mentioned, like multiple times before, probably already too many times, like with origami, that like when I would get into origami, that there was a skill ceiling to do so, and once I reached a certain skill ceiling between, like, knowledgeable and mastery, I never broke through that wall to go to mastery, because it wasn't really what I had. That wasn't really my end game. So I ended up leaving it because I'm like, well, I have a decent understanding of what this is, and that's kind of all I wanted with it. Whereas anime, since there is no skill ceiling for it, you can watch thousands of shows and never really have a complete understanding of what anime is. So it's one of those like endless type of experiences that you can return to for the rest of your life. And I guess it's similar to, like, saying, well, like, will you ever get tired of music? Will you ever get tired of film? I mean, you might eventually go through a period of time where you will lose interest in that, but eventually, like, if you really care about those things, you will return to it. I mean, there's been times where, like, I stopped caring about video games for a long period of time, because I get obsessed with something else, but then I return to them. But or like with music, I go through a period where I don't really find anything new, and what I have on my computer is no longer appealing to me. But then eventually I'll find something new and reignite my passion for music once again. And I guess the same is about anime. I've gone through a couple periods of burnout, not really recently, but during those periods I was just like, well, I'm gonna play video games or something. Last time I had a burnout period of anime with anime, I just played Persona 5. I sat down, played it over the course of like a week or two, completed the game, and by the time I completed the game, I'm like, well, that was fun. Time to return to anime. I kind of miss watching anime. And then once I returned, it's like, it's completely returning with a fresh perspective and excited about it all over again. So that's extended thoughts about this. So it's a response video to a response video, um, and we are returning to when response videos were really a thing on YouTube. The good old days. That's all.